The money was sitting in the crease of the seat like it had been waiting for her. $800, folded once and held with a green rubber band, and Tasha Boyd had exactly $4.17 in her own account that night. She found it at 11:40 on a Tuesday on the last 14 bus out of downtown, the one that ran nearly empty after the late shift let out. She had been cleaning offices since 4 that afternoon, the way she had cleaned them every weekday for 2 years, and her knees ached and her hands smelled like the lemon spray they made her use, and she was thinking about whether the heat in the apartment would hold until Friday. Then she sat down hard in the second to last row because her feet would not carry her another step, and her fingers brushed something stiff between the cushion and the wall. She pulled it out slow, the way you handle a thing you are not sure is real, and the green rubber band had a faint smell to it, vegetable and clean, the smell of a grocery aisle. She counted it under the yellow bus light, her lips moving, the driver watching her in the long mirror. 20s mostly, a few 50s, soft and worn the way money gets when it has been counted by hand more than once. $800. She counted it twice because the first count did not seem possible. More than she made in 2 weeks of scrubbing toilets and emptying the bins of people who never once learned her name, more than the rent, more than the late fee, and the glasses and the heat, all stacked together, and it had been sitting 3 inches from where a dozen strangers had parked their bodies and never thought to reach. She had no idea who it belonged to. And she had no idea that the man who lost it had spent that whole night calling every transit office in the city sick to his stomach because that money was the last thing his dead wife had ever handed him. Stay with me, because what Tasha did with that money in the next 90 seconds tells you everything about her, and what came back to her 6 weeks later will make you think differently about the people you walk past without seeing. Tasha was 31 years old, and she had been doing the math of her life out loud for as long as her daughter could remember. Bus fare was $2.50 each way. Rent was $940 a month, due on the 1st, and the late fee was $50 after the 5th. Her daughter Nia was 7, and Nia needed glasses. The school nurse had written about twice now, glasses that cost $220 at the place on Halstead, and Tasha had been putting $20 aside in an envelope in the kitchen drawer for 11 weeks and was still not there. She knew the price of everything, because everything had a price she could not quite reach. She had not always lived this thin. There had been a husband once, a quiet man named Andre who drove a delivery route and laughed at his own jokes before he finished them, and there had been a small house with a yard the size of a bedsheet, and then there had been a phone call on a Sunday afternoon and a man in a uniform at her door, and after that there had been only the arithmetic. Andre had been gone 3 years. Tasha did not talk about him much. She kept his work jacket on a hook by the door because Nia liked to put her face in it, and some nights so did she. So when she found $800 on an empty bus, she understood exactly what it could buy. It could buy the glasses and the rent and the late fee she was already bracing for. It could buy a month of not lying awake. Nobody had seen it. Nobody knew. The bus was empty, and the driver was looking at the road again, and the money was warm from the heat event under the seat. She sat with it in her lap for one full stop. Then she walked to the front of the bus and asked the driver if anyone had reported losing anything. The driver, a heavy-set man named Curtis, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, looked at the cash in her hand and then looked at her face, and something in him softened that he could not have explained. He told her no. Nobody had said anything, but that she could turn it in to the transit lost and found at the Lake Street Depot in the morning, and they would log it, and if the owner came looking, they would have it. He did not tell her that in his 14 years driving that route he had never once seen a person bring $800 to the front of his bus. Tasha rode to her stop, holding the money like it might dissolve. She walked the 3 blocks home under streetlights that buzzed and flickered, past the corner where the men stood, past the laundromat that was still open and bright and empty. She climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor and let herself in quietly so she would not wake Nia or the sitter, old Miss Renee from down the hall, who watched Nia for almost nothing and pretended the $20 Tasha forced on her every week was too much. Miss Renee was asleep in the chair with the television low, a church program with the sound almost off. Her glasses slid down, her nose and her hands folded over a magazine she had not been reading. Tasha woke her gently, the way you wake an old woman who has done you a kindness, with a hand on the shoulder, and her name said soft. She paid her the 20, folded it into the worn coin purse Miss Renee carried, and walked her down the hall to her door, and waited until she heard the deadbolt turn before she went back inside. Then she stood in her own small kitchen and looked at the envelope in the drawer, the one marked Gackless in Nia's own crooked handwriting, the G drawn backward and fixed, and she looked at the $800 on the counter under the bare bulb, and she did the hardest arithmetic of her life. She thought about Nia at the eye chart, squinting, leaning forward, embarrassed in front of the other children. She thought about the rent and the $50 late fee that was already as good as charged. She thought about how no one had seen her, how the bus had been empty, how the money had no name on it, and the man who lost it would never in his life find her. She thought all of it through, honestly, the way you have to think a thing through before you can be sure you mean your answer. And then she thought about what she would have to teach her daughter to believe in order to keep it, and she found she could not pay that price. She put the $800 in a clean sandwich bag. She pressed the air out and sealed it. She wrote the date on it in marker. She set it inside Andre's old lunch cooler on the top shelf where Nia could not reach, behind the good plates they never used, and she went to bed, and she did not sleep, and she did not spend a single dollar of it. Across the city, in a brick two-flat with a porch that needed paint, a man named Marcus Webb sat at his kitchen table with his phone in both hands and could not make himself put it down. He was 54 years old. He had lost the money at some point that evening, he was sure of it, somewhere between the cemetery and the bus he took home, because his truck was in the shop, and he had not noticed until he reached for it at his own front door and found his coat pocket empty. $800. To a lot of people, that was a bill, an inconvenience, a bad week. To Marcus, it was the exact amount his wife Loretta had pressed into his hand from her hospital bed 6 days before she died, folded once and wrapped in a green rubber band off a bunch of asparagus, and she had told him, "You take this, you do something good with it, you do not put it toward the funeral, you promise me." He had promised her. He had carried it for 11 months trying to figure out what good thing she meant, and he had carried it to her grave that very evening to sit with her and ask her one more time, and on the way home he had lost it. He did not sleep either. He called the transit hotline 4 times and got a recording. He called his daughter, who told him gently that it was just money, Daddy, and he said it was not, and she went quiet because she understood that it was not. What Marcus did not know, sitting at that table with his head in his hands, was that the money was already safe. It was sitting in a sandwich bag inside a dead man's lunch cooler on a top shelf across the city, kept by a woman who needed it more than he did and had decided without anyone watching that it was not hers to keep. The next morning was a Wednesday, and Wednesdays were when Nia had to be at school early for the reading group, so Tasha was up at 5:40 in the dark, the cooler with the money already in her bag. She got Nia dressed and fed, the same breakfast as always, toast and the cheap peanut butter and half a banana, and she squinted at Nia, squinting at the cereal box, and felt the glasses sitting on the top shelf in the form of $800 she was about to give away. Nia noticed her mother was quiet. Nia noticed most things. She was a small, serious girl with 2 careful braids and her father's habit of laughing early at jokes before the funny part even arrived, and she sat at the table with her toast and watched her mother move around the kitchen with the strange stillness of someone carrying a decision. She asked, "Mama, are we okay?" The way she had learned to ask, lightly like it was nothing, so that the answer would not frighten her either way. Tasha crouched down to her level, the lunch bag with the cooler already by the door, and took her daughter's small face in both hands and said they were okay. They were always going to be okay, and she meant it as a promise to herself, as much as to her daughter, a promise made over $800 she was about to walk out the door and give back. She dropped Nia at school. She rode 2 buses to the Lake Street depot. She stood in a line under fluorescent lights at a counter with a scratched plexiglass window, and when it was her turn, she slid the sandwich bag through the gap and said she had found this on the 1-4 last night and wanted to turn it in. The clerk behind the glass was a young man who looked like he had not expected his morning to contain this. He counted the money twice, the second time slower, his mouth moving the way hers had on the bus. He asked her if she was sure. He asked her almost as a joke, almost as the thing you say to fill a silence you do not understand, why she did not just keep it. Who would ever know? And Tasha said, because it is not mine, and the way she said it, plain and tired and without a trace of performance, made the young man stop joking and set down his pen and look at her for a second like she was a kind of person he had heard about but never stood across from. Then he reached for his form. He wrote it all down, the amount, the date, the route, the green rubber band. He gave her a yellow carbon receipt with a claim number on it and a date stamped in faded ink, and he told her that if no one claimed it in 90 days, the money would legally revert to her, the finder, and she could come back and collect it. He said it like he was offering her good news, like he was sure she would be back on the 91st day with the receipt in her hand. Tasha folded the receipt and put it in the zip pocket of Andre's jacket, which she wore when it was cold. He said thank you, and she went to work, and she did not let herself think about the 91st day even once. She did not think she would ever see that money again, and she had made her peace with that before she ever slid it through the glass. She told no one, not Miss Renee, not Nia, not the women she cleaned alongside. It was not a story she was telling. It was just a thing she had done because she did not know how to do otherwise, and then she went back to her life, which did not get easier just because she had been good. If you've ever done the right thing when the wrong thing would have solved your whole month, you already know the strange loneliness of it, the way nobody hands you anything for it, the way the rent is still due. Tell me in a word what kept her honest that night, because I think it is the same thing that is keeping some of you honest right now. Then stay with her, because the world was about to start catching up to what she did. The 90 days did not pass quietly for Tasha. They passed the way her months always passed, in a grind of small emergencies that each cost more than she had. The heat did fail the Friday after she found the money, the pilot light out and the apartment going cold by degrees while Nia slept in 2 sweaters, and Tasha paid $40. She did not have to a man who came at 9 at night and had it lit in 10 minutes and would not take $1 less. She made it back by walking instead of taking the bus 2 miles each way for a week, her knees telling her about it the whole way. Nia's reading group moved up a level, and Nia glowed about it for a week, came home with a gold star sticker stuck to the back of her hand, and would not let her mother wash it off until it wore away on its own. The glasses stayed unbought. The envelope in the drawer stuck at $160, then climbed to $180 when Tasha started skipping her own lunch again to push it higher, eating the crackers from the break room and telling the other women she was just not hungry, drinking the bitter coffee to fill the space where the food should have been. She did not once think about the $800 sitting in a locked drawer at a depot across the city. With her name on the claim, she had given it away in her heart the night she sealed the bag. It was not hers to think about. Marcus Webb spent those same weeks learning how the city loses things. He filed the report at the Lake Street Depot the very next day, but he filed it at the wrong window, the damaged property window, and the clerk there never connected it to the found cash log 3 feet away. He described the green rubber band. He said it was $800, and the woman behind that counter told him gently that people did not turn in $800 in cash, that he should file a police report and hope, and Marcus walked out into the cold, sure that the last gift his wife ever gave him was gone into the pocket of a stranger who would never know what they had taken. He did not blame the stranger. That was the thing about Marcus. He sat on his unpainted porch that night, with his coat still on, and tried to forgive whoever found it, tried to imagine they had needed it, tried to believe Loretta would have wanted it to do good, even in hands he would never see. He almost made himself believe it, and yet the promise sat in him like a stone. You do something good with it, you promise me. And he had not done the good thing. He had lost it on a bus, and a man does not forgive himself easily for losing the last thing. His daughter Camille came by on Sundays the way she always had, with a foil pan of food he would eat half of, and she found him quieter than usual 3 weeks running. She was 26 and worked at a bank downtown and worried about her father in the specific way of a child who has already buried one parent and knows exactly how much there is to lose. She sat with him on the porch and told him to let it go. She told him the money was not Mom, that Mom was in the way. He still set 2 coffee cups out of habit and caught himself, not in $800 on a city bus. He told her he knew that. He told her he knew it the way you know a thing, and still cannot make your hands believe it. Neither of them believed the conversation was really about the money, and neither of them said what it was really about, because some griefs you can only circle, you cannot walk straight at them. The depot, meanwhile, did its slow work without anyone watching. The sandwich bag with $800 and a date written on it sat in a locked drawer in a back room, logged under a claim number, waiting out its 90 days. A supervisor named Walter, a man 2 years from retirement, who had seen every kind of human being pass through that counter, noticed it during a routine audit in the 5th week. He noticed the amount. He noticed that the finder had turned it in $800, walked in off the street and handed it over, and that no one had claimed it. And Walter, who did not believe in much anymore, found himself bothered by it in a good way, found himself wanting the story to end right. So Walter did something he was not strictly required to do. He went back through the reports. He cross-checked the found cash log against every loss report filed within 3 days of the find in every category, including the damaged property window, where a tired clerk had once filed a man's grief in the wrong place. And there it was, a loss report, $800, a green rubber band, a man named Marcus with a phone number who had stood at the wrong window and been turned away. Walter sat back in his chair. He looked at the 2 pieces of paper that had been sitting 30 feet apart for 5 weeks, the woman who turned it in and the man who lost it, and he understood that he was holding the whole thing in his hands. He picked up the phone. Marcus almost did not answer. The number was unfamiliar, and he was tired of unfamiliar numbers. He answered anyway, and a steady older voice asked if he was Marcus, and if he had reported losing $800 on or about the night of the 14th, and Marcus stood up out of his chair so fast it scraped the floor. Walter told him plainly. A woman had found it on the 14 bus that same night and turned it in at this counter the next morning. All of it, the full amount, with the green rubber band still around it. She had not kept $1. Had she? It had been here the whole time, logged and waiting, while Marcus stood at the wrong window, believing it was gone. Marcus could not speak. He gripped the edge of his kitchen counter and put his hand over his mouth and made a sound that was not quite a word. When he could talk again, he asked the only thing that mattered to him. He asked who she was. He asked for the name of the woman who found $800 on an empty bus and gave it back. Walter looked at the report. He hesitated because there were rules about that. Then he looked at the report again and decided that some things were bigger than the rules, and he read out a name. He could not give out her address, he said. The money was also hers to claim too, if she chose, once the 90 days passed, because she was the finder and the owner had to come prove the claim. Marcus said he did not care about the rules and he did not care about the 90 days. He said he wanted to give the woman a reward. Walter said gently that she had not asked for one, that she had turned it in like it was the most natural thing in the world and walked out to catch a bus to work. And that detail, the bus to work, landed in Marcus like a hook because it told him she was not a person with money to spare. She was a person who had every reason to keep it and had not. He drove to the depot that afternoon and proved his claim, the rubber band, the amount, the date, and they gave him back his $800 in an envelope, and he sat in his truck in the parking lot and did not start the engine for a long time. He held the money his wife had given him. He had it back, and he found that having it back was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of a question he could not put down. Who was she? What did she need? What good thing had Loretta meant, and was it possible his wife had known somehow that losing this money was how it would finally find the person it was for? He went looking for her, not to repay a debt, exactly, to answer his wife. It took him almost 6 weeks from the night he lost it, because the city does not give up its people easily, and Walter would not bend on the address. Marcus had a name now, though, and he had time, and he had a stubbornness that grief had sharpened into a kind of patience. He went back to the 1-4 bus. He rode it at the same hour. She had found the money, the late run that ran nearly empty, and he talked to the drivers. Most of them did not know her. On the 3rd night, he drew Curtis. The heavyset man with the reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and when Marcus described a woman who had found a fold of cash and brought it to the front of the bus, Curtis remembered her at once. Because you do not forget a thing like that. Curtis would not give a stranger a rider's information either, and Marcus respected him for it. Curtis looked at this older man riding his empty bus 3 nights running, looking for a woman to thank, and Curtis made a small decision of his own. He told Marcus that the woman he was looking for cleaned offices downtown, that she got on at the same stop most nights, the one by the glass tower on Wacker around 11:15. After her shift, he did not give a name or an address. He gave a stop and a time. He gave Marcus a place to simply be and let the rest be up to whatever Marcus believed in. So Marcus stood at a bus stop by a glass tower on a cold Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, holding nothing, not knowing what he would say. Wand. And at 11:12 a tired woman in a man's work jacket came out of the service door of the tower with 2 other women, said her goodnights and walked to the stop alone. He knew her before she reached the light, not from any photograph. He knew her from the way she carried herself, straight-backed and bone-tired, a woman who had every reason to be hard and was not. He did not rush her. He let her reach the stop. Then he said quietly that he was sorry to bother her so late, but he thought she might be the woman who found some money on this bus about 6 weeks ago, $800, and turned it in. And Tasha went still and looked at him, this older man in a clean coat with his hands open at his sides, and she said carefully that she had turned in some money once. Yes, she did not ask for anything. She just waited, guarded and polite, for this stranger to explain himself. Marcus told her. He told her about Loretta and the hospital bed and the green rubber band off the asparagus. He told her about the promise, do something good with it, you promise me, and about carrying it for 11 months and losing it on the way home from the cemetery and being sure it was gone forever. He told her that she had given it back, all of it, when she clearly could have used it, and that he had spent 6 weeks trying to find her, not because he owed her, but because he needed her to know what she had actually done. Tasha listened. The bus came and went, and she let it go, the late 14, her ride home, pulling away into the dark, and she did not move. When Marcus finished, she did not say anything clever. She said she was sorry about his wife. She said she was glad the money got back to him, that she had thought about it sometimes, wondered who had lost it, hoped it had not been somebody who needed it as bad as she did. Then, because he asked, and because she was too tired to perform, she told him a little of the truth. The glasses her daughter needed, the envelope in the drawer, or the $4 she had in her account the night she found his $800. Marcus stood at that bus stop and understood finally what good thing his wife had meant. It was not a cause. It was not a charity with a name. It was this woman, this exact woman, who had needed the money badly enough to change her life and had handed it back anyway, and the good Loretta wanted done was to take care of her. He did not insult her by trying to hand her cash at a bus stop. He had learned in 6 weeks what kind of person she was. Instead, he asked if he could buy her a cup of coffee just to talk, and he asked it so plainly, with so little underneath it, that she said yes, and they walked to an all-night diner 3 blocks over, the kind with worn red booths and a coffee pot that was always half full, and a waitress who knew better than to hurry the only 2 people in the place. They sat down across from each other under the warm amber light, a tired woman in a man's work jacket and a grieving man in a clean coat, and the steam came up off the cups between them, and they talked until almost 2 in the morning. He learned that her husband, Andre, had been gone 3 years, killed by a driver who ran a light on a Sunday afternoon while Andre was 3 blocks from home, and that the jacket she wore was his, that it still had the smell of him in the collar if she did not wash it, which was why she did not. She learned that Loretta had been a school librarian for 30 years, that she had read to children who could not sit still and made them sit still anyway, that she had kept a jar of rubber bands on her desk because she could not stand to waste a single thing that might still be useful, and that the green one had come off a bunch of asparagus the week before she went into the hospital for the last time. He learned that Nia was 7, that she wanted to be a teacher, that she squinted at everything and was too proud to say so. She learned that Marcus owned a small heating and cooling business, 3 trucks and 6 employees, the kind of business a man builds slow over 30 years out of cold mornings and other people's broken furnaces, and that he had been about to retire and sell it before Loretta got sick, and that now he did not know what he was working for or who he was working it for, since the person he had wanted to rest beside was gone. He told her he had almost not come tonight, that he had stood at the stop the 2 nights before and lost his nerve and gone home, that the only reason he came back was that he could not stand the thought of her never knowing what she had done, of her carrying that act around inside her, thinking it had vanished into nothing, when in fact it had reached a dying woman's last wish and pulled it back from the dark. Tasha turned her coffee cup a slow half-circle on the table and said she had not done it to be known. She had done it because her daughter was asleep in a bed 3 miles away, and she wanted to be the kind of mother that girl could believe in. And Marcus nodded, because that was the same reason Loretta had given him the money, and he understood that the 2 women would have liked each other. By the time the coffee was cold, something had been decided between them that neither of them said out loud. Marcus drove her home that night so she would not have to wait for the next empty bus, and at her door he did not offer her money. He offered her a job. He told her his office had no one who kept it clean and no one who answered the phone with any warmth and no one he trusted, and that he had watched her hand back $800 she needed, and he could not think of a single person he would trust more. The pay was nearly double what the cleaning company gave her, with hours that let her see her daughter off to school and home again. It was not charity, he said that plainly. It was the best hiring decision he would ever make, and they both knew it. Tasha did not cry at the bus stop, and she did not cry in the diner. She cried at her own front door, quietly, with her hand pressed over her mouth so she would not wake near, because for 3 years she had been doing arithmetic that never came out right, and a stranger on a bus had just changed the numbers. She started the following Monday. The work was real work, and she did it well, the way she did everything, and within a month the small office on the south side ran better than it had in years. The phones answered warm, the books tidy, the break rooms stocked with a coffee. The men actually liked instead of the cheapest tin. The 6 employees who had been a little wary of the boss's mystery hire were won over, completely inside 2 weeks by a woman who learned their kids' names and their birthdays, and which one of them was trying to quit smoking and needed to be handed a stick of gum without a word said about it. Marcus watched her settle in and felt something in his chest he had not felt since Loretta, not romance, nothing like that, but the particular peace of seeing a good thing land in the place it was always meant for, like a key finally turning a lock that had stuck for years. The glasses came first, of course. $220 at the place on Halstead, paid with her own first paycheck, the bills counted out at the counter by a woman who for once did not have to count them twice. Nia picked out purple frames, tried on 6 pairs, and came back to the purple, and she put them on and turned to the eye chart on the far wall and read the bottom line out loud, the tiny line nobody is supposed to get, in a voice that climbed with wonder at her own sudden power. Tasha stood behind her with both hands on her daughter's shoulders and watched the world come into focus for her child, watched Nia's whole face change as the blur she had been living inside resolved into edges and letters, and her mother's face turned down toward her, and that, Tasha would say later, was the moment the money came back. Not the job. The glasses. Her daughter reading the bottom line in purple frames, looking up, saying, "Mama, I can see the little one. I can see all of it." The envelope in the kitchen drawer, the one marked "Glass" in Nia's crooked hand, Tasha did not throw away. She emptied it of the $160 she had saved, and she put that money towards something else, and she kept the empty envelope in the drawer. And sometimes when things were good, she would open the drawer and see it, and remember the night she had $800 on a counter and $4 in the bank and chose the envelope anyway. Marcus and Tasha did not become a love story, in case that is where you thought this was going. They became something the world has fewer words for, 2 people who had each lost the person who anchored them and found, in an unlikely place, someone who reminded them what they were for. He came to Nia's school programs. Nia called him Mr. Marcus, and then, after a while, just stopped using. The Mr. Camille, his daughter, who had told him to let the money go, met Tasha and understood her father at once, and was glad. Miss Renee from down the hall got a part-time job answering the office phones on the days Tasha was out, because Tasha had not forgotten a single person who had been kind to her when she had nothing. A year after, the night on the bus, Marcus finally did the thing Loretta had asked. He took the $800, the actual bills, the ones with the green rubber band he had never removed, and he framed the rubber band behind glass and put it on the wall of the office where Tasha could see it from her desk. The money itself he gave to Nia in a savings account for college, $800 to start, the first deposit toward a teacher's degree for a girl in purple glasses. He told Tasha that Loretta had wanted him to do something good with it, and that the good thing had turned out to be a chain, his wife to him to her to the world, and that the only way to honor it was to keep it moving. Tasha kept Andre's jacket on the hook by the door. Some nights, Nia still put her face in it. She did not need to wear it to work anymore, against the cold, because Marcus had given her a coat, her first winter at the office, a warm one, and on the inside pocket, the zip pocket where she used to keep a yellow carbon receipt, she kept nothing now, because she did not need to carry the proof of who she was. The people around her already knew. The bus still runs the late route nearly empty out of downtown past the glass towers. Curtis still drives it some nights, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He never told anyone what he did. The night he gave a grieving stranger a stop and a time and let whatever he believed in handle the rest. He just drives and watches his riders in the long mirror, and every so often he sees a tired woman counting something in her lap under the yellow light, and he thinks about how you never know which one of them is about to change a life, including their own, by doing the small honest thing when no one is watching, and the wrong thing would be so easy. Tasha Boyd had $4.17 the night she found $800, and she gave the $800 back, and what came back to her was not $800. It was a daughter who could see, and a job with warmth in it, and a man who came to the school programs, and an empty envelope in a drawer that she keeps to remember by the world kept a longer memory than she ever expected it to. If somebody once did the right thing for you when it cost them, or if you have ever handed back what you needed because it was not yours, tell me about it, because those stories deserve to be said out loud. And if this one stayed with you, there is another one waiting, about a man who shoveled the same widow's walk every winter for 9 years and never knocked on her door, and what her family found in his name after he was gone.